Hi, y'all. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And this is our final week for November's book of the month, Bananapants by Penny Reid.
That's right. We're up to chapter 25 and reading to the end.
Yes. And so we left off with Henri trying to approach Ava outside her office in the rain, and Des comes up and is like, snuggling
Okay.
her, and it's very clear that they're like together. And Henri is clearly less than pleased about this situation. Um,
Ava also is like, she has not been warned. She doesn't really know,
right.
but her aunt, her mom, told her once that like when it's need to know, usually it's to protect the loved one, not because. So she's
Right.
just like, I'm just not going to say anything
And
unless
also she's a
someone
tax
asks
attorney. So
me.
she's like, unless somebody asks you a direct question, just shut up, basically. Like,
She's like, I'm gonna treat this like a deposition.
yes.
I will not answer unless asked.
Do not
So,
volunteer anything unless somebody talks to you directly, just be quiet. So she
but
just
it
sort of stands there and like lets it play out, which is
and
interesting.
doesn't notice that Desmond is acting like
He's playing the
himbo.
himbo. Yeah.
She's like, oh, okay.
Okay, this is happening. And so of course they're playing up their like reconnection, and he calls her Bunny, which surprises her, and she's trying to like cover her surprise because of Henry standing right there, and she panics and calls him Daddy. And then they like basically right after that they get in the car, and Des is
The
like,
thing that makes me laugh the most about this scene, and friends, you should go read it, is that
yes.
she is like, he's like something bunny, and she's like, so then she goes, well, okay, Daddy, and then immediately looks around, and every person
Everyone
is
is like
like,
wide-eyed. So in the car, he says to her, Daddy? Like, you can't call me that in public. And she's like, why
but
not?
he also like closes the like
Yeah.
privacy screen between the drivers because she
Yes.
still has bodyguards.
Oh yeah, because she still has
So
her guards. Yeah. And she's like, why can't I? And then he kisses her and explains that it made him hot, which was surprising. She is shocked by this, and he kind of is too, honestly. It's pretty funny. And so then she asks him, she's like, clearly I need to know more about what's going on with Henry. Like he keeps on showing up. Like, what is happening right now? And so he explains about intercepting the gifts and monitoring her phone and email. And she is like, okay, I agree. This man is clearly unhinged and like he's a bad guy, but like I already promised you that I wouldn't talk to him. So like you should have just trusted me. Like this is garbage.
she
And
was also then unprepared, right, for what came because she
right.
didn't realize that he was trying to get in touch with her or anything. And he is like, I didn't like listen to your phone calls. I just like checked the numbers.
Right.
And also, I didn't read your email. Sue did.
Right.
She's still like,
No. She's like, "No, I promised and you didn't trust me." And he immediately apologizes. He's like, "You're right. You did promise and like I should have listened to you. I'm sorry. Also, I should have given you more information. Like I don't like when people make decisions for me and like I shouldn't have done that to you." And so
and
I'm
she
gonna be
is like,
100% honest from now on. Like I promise. And
but she's like,
she's
who does
flummoxed.
that? Nobody, no other man I've ever dated has ever admitted when they were wrong. What is
Or
happening?
like gave a full apology with no caveats, no like I'm sorry you feel that way bullshit. Like he just full on was like I'm so sorry, you're right. And she's like, who is this man? Like this is not fair. And so
She's
she
also
still
like, this is temporary. Maybe he's practicing for his real girlfriend someday.
right.
I
Oh
don't
God.
know. I hate it.
And she's
He's
still mad, but she's also sad because she feels like she has no right to be mad at him. Like they're not this is not a real relationship. Like they're not, so she's like she feels like she can't even like be mad. And so the car is taking them to his parents' house because she was headed to the like knitting night with their moms. Um and he tells her she should go borrow clothes from his sister's room when she gets there. And so they drop her off and she does do that. And then she goes into the
she
kitchen.
invites him to come,
Yeah.
and he's like,
Mm,
no,
nope,
nothing.
not ready
And
for that.
so
Yeah.
she's like, "Well, are you gonna miss me?" And he's, it's
Yeah.
really sweet, but
And he is like, I
also,
missed you all day and I'm gonna miss you tonight. And of course, then this is mixed messages for her because in her mind, she's like, this isn't real. I can't even be mad at him. And then meanwhile, he's like, no, I missed you. And like, no, not I missed my girl, like a girlfriend. Like, I missed you specifically. And so she does go in and change clothes. And then she goes to the kitchen and she finds his dad, Quinn. And
He's
of course,
making meat rosettes. So she's
yeah,
like, why are you putting salami in a
in
like
a champagne
glass?
glass or
What's
something. Yeah, it
happening?
was funny. Um,
Um,
but of course, she's direct as ever. And so after a little bit of small talk, she looks at him and says, "Why don't you like Desmond?" And he is shocked by this question. And he's like, "I do like him. I love him." And she's like, "Why don't you guys ever hang out then? Like, my brother and my dad hang out all the time. Like, when he's on tour or whatever, my dad will go meet up with him." And of course, he's like, "It's complicated." And she's like, "I mean, what's not, basically?" And so he tells her a little bit about his family history from when he was growing up and his own like juvenile delinquency and all that stuff. And then he basically says, like, every time we talk, I make things worse for him. I
he
aggravate him and his condition. I didn't handle his diagnosis well. But I've read a lot of books since then and I know better. And of course, after all this, she's like, "Why don't you just tell him that then?" And he says, "I don't deserve the chance to apologize, Ava." And
he
that, and like, basically, he's worried he would make it all about him and that that's not what Des actually needs, which is why he hasn't done it.
yeah, he's talks about how his brother Shelley died, and that he feels responsible for it, but also it was like the line of made that a situation that happened. And
Yeah.
then the Aunt Jem, his sister, is like a full-on villain. Ava already knows some of the stuff that she's done, and it's
Yep.
like, tried to kidnap his wife, like did
Right.
it's like really
It's like
kind
real
of
bad stuff. Yeah.
unhinged. And he is like, yeah, she's not great. And so his diagnosis really like his diagnosis and then the job that he chose to have like together like really
It hit like all his
poked
dad's
at
buttons.
everything
Yep.
that was bad for him.
Yeah.
And so, and he now obviously knows that his initial response and the way that he like dealt with his son at first, he said, like, I wished that he was faking. It would have been better for me if this was like
Not
just
really
a
happening.
rebellious phase or
Yep.
something. But he realizes now that it wasn't, and it feels very much like he thinks it's like it's too late. He
Right.
feels like he triggers his son. And we've already seen them
Yep.
together from Dez's POV.
Hmm.
And like as an observer, I'm like, well, were you really trying not to upset him? Because
Right. Because
I
it
think
didn't
this
seem like it.
is
Yeah.
but he's very like I'm just
Yeah.
not good for him kind of is what he's
Yeah.
saying. And Ava's like, I think you should rethink that. I
Yeah.
don't
And she's also like, obviously, it is very complicated, but like, so is US tax law. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't itemize your deductions. And he's like, "What?"
okay.
And she's
It is
like,
funny.
you, this is a good talk. Like, I think I've given you a lot to think about. Like, I think you should, rethink what you're thinking. And like, I'll see you later. Bye. Basically.
Yeah,
Like,
that was very funny.
and so that night she kind of can't sleep and she decides she's just going to enjoy this time with him for what it is and not overthink it and not continuously remind herself about how it's not real and stuff. And like,
Mhm.
she can be sad after he's gone. Like, she's going to, take it while she can. Um, and so they text in the morning and he offers to make her dinner that night and have a movie night. And as they're talking, um,
She is already like she's like, ooh, he wants to come over and sex? What? I
yeah,
thought he said 5 days. And he's like, what do you mean? I just
he's
a
like,
movie.
"We're just
It's
gonna hang
fine. And we
out."
could
Yeah, like, slow your
and he's
roll.
like, no, do boyfriend and girlfriend wear pajamas? And she's like, I mean, eventually? I don't
Yeah,
like she is so
she's
confused.
never
Although
made it
she's
that far either.
but he's like, we've worn pajamas before. And she's like, when we were kids, I don't know
Yeah,
about this. So it is kind of funny because they
it's
are
cute.
still trying to navigate. And
They
she,
are.
for a girl who has never made it past like, what did she say? Like second base or something with
Yeah,
any human,
yeah,
is now like she heard like him. They were on the phone and she hears like his sheets or something rustle and she's like, great, now I'm thinking about him in the bed. And I'm like,
right.
you got real horny.
Yeah, oh yeah, she did. And so there, he makes her laugh and he says, "I love your laugh. Promise in 50 years from now it'll be exactly the same." And like, while that makes her want to swoon, it also makes her want to cry because she's like, "I don't even know if we have a future, much less in 50
Yeah.
years." Like,
Like, are you going to be around 50 years from now? I don't know.
and so when she gets home from work that night, he's already in her apartment cooking. And she's like, my dad probably gave him a key, like, who knows, right? And so he's like, they're talking and he's looking at her like a snack. And he's like, "Dinner's almost ready, but like I'm hungry right now. And so he like, brings her over to the couch basically and like goes down on her and then takes her to the bedroom and later on he's thinking, is this happiness or is this bipolar? Like, and this is a question that he asks himself a lot in his life, like when things are going well. Um and so he asks her, I forget how they get on the topic, but he asks her like what she thinks about to get off, like what she fantasizes about or whatever. And she basically tells him she has to have this like whole story. Like she has to know the person already and be, which, tracks
Yeah.
with everything that we know about her already. And usually takes her, he's like, good Lord, like how long does this take you? Right. And she's like, I mean, like an hour. And then she's like, are you laughing at me? And he's like, no, but like, I'm just trying to picture this. And like, it's sort of funny, like picturing you like making up this whole scenario.
Yeah.
And so she's like, well, what do you think about, and he's like, you. And she's like, you do not. Like, if you don't want to tell me, fine, right? And he's like,
Yeah.
no. He says, my whole life, you are the only one I think about when I come. Then she's like, oh,
I was like that too. I'm like,
absolutely.
that's
So the next morning, Sue is talking to him, and she's like, you have to go to the Caymans
Sue
today.
has a tracker on this man, and so she's like, "Are you stalking that girl again?
Yeah.
Because you've
And then she's
been
like, either way, it doesn't matter because you need to go to the Caymans today. Like, you don't have time to go talk to her first. Like, you have to leave. Your car is coming right now. Henry has like laxed his security since everything that happened at his office. And so there's nobody there right now. Like, it's just the security system, no like people or whatever.
people."
And like,
Yeah,
now is his moment. And so he gets in the car and he's on his way to the airport and he calls her and she doesn't answer. And by the time she calls him back, he's already like ready to board. And he says to her, like, I have to leave town for a while and I won't be able to talk like while I'm
while I'm
gone.
gone.
It's a work emergency. And so she's like silent. And at first he thinks she's like dropped the call. And he's like, what's wrong? And she's like,
And he's
nothing.
like actively boarding the plane as
Yeah.
he's talking
And he
to
doesn't
her.
want to like have this conversation around people. He's trying to like slowly not like let everybody else board the plane first. And so he's like, what's wrong? And she's like, nothing. I'll miss you. And he's like, I'll miss you. I'll be back next week. Okay. And then she's silent again. And he's like, you believe me, right? And she's like, sure, or something like that. And he's like, oh God, like she doesn't believe me. And so he's like, promise me something, anything. And she's like, okay, fine. I promise if you make it back by next Friday, I'll call you daddy all day on Saturday. And he's like, I will be back by next Friday, like guaranteed, right? And so for a minute they sort of talk about the daddy thing and like why it seems to work for him. And he's like, it's like a competence thing for him. Like
Yeah.
he's a good protector, he's a good provider, he's a, whatever. And she's like, I
He
think maybe
did
you're the one
mention
that has
before
daddy issues. She
that
says.
that had never worked for him before, but when she says it,
Yeah, and he's
so
like,
it
I
is.
mean, maybe. Like I do really like taking care of you. And she's like, and also you do really admire your own dad. And he's like, yeah. And she says, you should ask him to apologize. And he's like, what? Like that was like out of left field for him. Like he's no,
Yeah.
he doesn't want to hear that. And he's like, and she's like, you should think about it. And he's like, yeah, okay. Which is the wrong answer in this moment because he has a tendency to say things to people and then just do whatever he wants. And that's how she feels about what he just said, which makes her
Um,
disbelieve that he's going to come back too.
yeah. I have a brother who his whole life did that. Like, uh-huh. And then
Okay,
would just
sure.
do what he wanted.
Yeah.
So I could see how his very quick, yeah, yeah, okay,
Uh-huh.
made her feel in both instances, because he
Uh-huh.
did it when she was like, "Are you coming back?"
Right.
And then with this, and she's just like, "Oh,
And so she
mm-mm."
says, will I really see you again? And he's like, of course. And then he's like, oh God, you don't believe me. And she's like, and she tells him about the thing that he does. And he's like, no, that's not what's happening here. Like, and she says, no, listen, if this is the last time we talk, I should tell you, I love you a lot, no matter what. And he's like, please listen to me. Like, I'm going to be back. And she's like,
She is
uh,
giving him like, if I never see you, if this
I
is
hope
our
you have a
last
happy life.
goodbye,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
he's just like,
And
"But
he's like,
I'm
I'm
coming
not
back,"
leaving
and
you.
she's anyway.
And then she just says goodbye. And he's like, fuck. Like, that whole
But
thing
he's
went so
also on
wrong.
the plane now and
Yes.
can't
He can't
continue
do
talking
anything.
anyway.
So we're back in her head this time, and she wants to believe him, but she doesn't. History has prevailed, basically. So
Well,
then,
she's very like, at least he called me this time,
right.
because before he
Yeah.
just disappeared and that
Yeah.
was that. So
So
progress.
the next day is Friday. So they're talking about him being back in like exactly a week. So she calls in sick to work. And she spends the weekend basically like crying and binging Lord of the Rings movies. And it's like breakup times, right? So
Yeah.
then Monday she like deep cleans her apartment while she's like listening to a breakup playlist. Like she's working through her shit, right? So Tuesday she is still cleaning and Sue calls her
Uh-huh.
and she's like, Des is back and he needs you. He's hurt. Bring a first
Like
aid
bring
kit.
it. Yeah.
And I'm sending you the hotel info. And of course, she looks down at herself. No shower in like 4 days. She's a disaster. She stinks. She's like,
She's
oh,
been
well, gotta go.
crying. She's been like she's
Yes,
got
she's a
every
mess. So she
she's
goes,
probably dusty. I feel like most women would know that feeling. Like
oh, yeah.
you've been cleaning, so
Hmm.
you feel gross because dust
And you've
and
been
like whatever
crying.
cleaning
Yep.
solution you've been crying, so you've got like your face is sticky,
Yeah.
everything is bad.
She's a hot mess. And she's like, okay,
But
gotta go.
she's yeah,
So off she goes. The taxi's stuck in traffic. She decides to get out and take the train. One of her bodyguards is with her, and he's like mean mugging her the whole time because none of this is safe, right? He's very mad about it. And so she finally gets to the hotel. She gets up to his floor. She's banging down his door. He answers the door in a towel, like he's clearly just got out of the shower. She's looking him all over. He does not look injured. Her
no.
thoughts are racing. Like, did he even leave town? Like, what is he doing here? Why didn't he call me first thing when he got back? Like, she is like spiraling out. And so he finally is like looking at her and he's like, have you been sick? And she says, yes. And then he's like, are you still mad at me? Yes. And
Uh-huh.
I'm most pissed that I don't have a right to be mad at you. And he's like, why don't you? And she says, because I don't have a claim on you. Like, you owe me nothing. We're not even friends anymore. We're people who used to be friends who still get along really good. Like, that's literally it.
And he's just like, what do you what?
Yeah. And she's
I
like, so I need to stop these lessons or whatever and let you go because this is not good for me. Like, I'm in a bad place right now. And he looks panicked when she says that. And he like blocks her from leaving. And he says, like, Ava, listen to me, please. Like, I and she right before she says she's gonna let him go, she tells him that she loves him. She's like, I've been in love with you probably since we were teenagers. Like, this is not good for me now, and like I have to be done.
yeah.
And he's like, no way. Like, I love you. I've loved you since before I can even remember. And
But
my
he's
feelings always
also
felt
like,
too
this
big.
wasn't fake for me. None of this was ever fake for me. And
Yeah.
she's just like, what?
She's
No.
shocked by this. Yeah. And he's like, my feelings for you always felt too big. Like, that's always how it's felt for me. And so he like literally picks her up and he's taking her over to the bed. He's starting to undress her. And she's like, wait, wait, wait. Like she needs to think. And she's like, wait, stop. What when did you get back? She says to him. And so he's like, I got back this
Like,
morning. My secure phone was dead. Like I could use the driver's phone to call Sue to call you. I have no idea why she told you what she told you. Like that I literally got in the shower
he's
after 4 days and then you're here. Like this is
he's
the
like, I
the event.
literally walked in, took a shower, came out, and you were out here.
Yes.
This is how long I've been back. And
Yeah.
she's just like,
And
um,
so then she is like, okay, this makes sense. Like she's starting to like file things in proper order. And she's like, I was completely devastated when you left me 10 years ago. And like you need to apologize for that. Like we still haven't even really talked about that. We just kind of glossed it over, mostly because I didn't think you were going to stick around. So if you are, like, this is the time. Like we're talking
we
about
need
it.
to talk about it. Yeah.
And he does apologize. He's like, I'm so sorry I hurt you. Like I never want to hurt you, but like that was the situation that we were in. And I hope, he says, I both hope and dread the day that you'll understand why I left, but I did have to do it. And I'm sorry that that hurt you, basically.
Yeah.
And she,
He's very like, it's clear that he feels bad that she was hurt, but that
yes,
he feels like there was no other option for
yes.
him than to leave
And
and
this
to
sort
leave
of
the way
makes,
he did, to like cut her
yeah.
out too,
And this sort of makes her feel like she can finally, like, this old wound has been like cleaned out and she can finally like be done
let
with
it
it.
heal. Yeah.
And so she starts crying and he's like, oh my God, you're crying. Like, please don't cry. What's happening? Right. And she's like, no, I'm so happy right now. Like,
Yeah.
I have all these feelings for you and I didn't think I would ever be able to do anything with them. So like, thank you. She says to him and he's like, don't thank me. Like, oh my God. And it's very sweet. And he's like, listen, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, but I also want to touch you really bad right now. And like he starts continuing to undress her and she's like, wait,
And
no, I
she's
need to take
like,
a
I need
shower.
a shower. Yeah.
Like
She's
right
like,
now.
As soon as sense returns, she's
Yes.
like, no
Right now I
touching
need to
until I
shower.
claim clean.
And he's like, okay, but first, like, I am yours and you are mine. Like, you can and should get mad at me whenever you want to.
Yeah,
And like, you should tell me what you want and expect me to, you know, deal with that.
yeah.
Like, I'm never going to lie to you again. I'm retiring from the business. We'll figure everything out together, basically.
He has been thinking about whether he could like open some kind of like
Like a martial arts
gym
studio.
or yeah, and like he's because he's thinking about like what he could do where he can set his hours and
Right.
where like it won't be impacted
He doesn't
if
have like a
he
boss. Yeah.
um and how like he could take care of himself and his
Hmm.
mental health, but still he doesn't actually need it doesn't sound like he actually needs
He does
money
like
a
some day
lot,
trading and stuff. Like he's made
but
money other ways. But
but
um,
he what he
but yeah,
needs to be busy, and so he's he's already thought about this, which is very cool because it's not like he was waiting and in a panic is like no I'll he already has like
right.
semi
He already has
planned.
sort of plans. And he does say to her, like, we also need to talk about my bipolar and my ADHD and how that can affect us in the future and like how we're going to handle it. Like, this is all things that we need to discuss, you know? So he sends her off to the shower. And when she comes out, she decides she wants to be in charge this time. And so she does, but like he's like
But she
dying. She
also
won't even
doesn't
let him
fully
touch
know
her.
what she's doing, so she's like trying to be in charge, but also she's like, but is this right?
Do I
And
do this? Right.
so
And she won't let him touch her. He's like gripping onto the bed and she's just like fumbling her way around. It was very cute and very hot actually.
yeah.
And very funny. And so afterward, they talk a little bit about the last 10 years and like how and when she started being so careful about her life and like saying no to fun and stuff like that. And how much braver she's felt since he came back. And he says that she basically does the same thing for him. It's really sweet. So a week later, Des hasn't been taking good care of himself. He hasn't been sleeping as much. He missed two of his therapy appointments. He hasn't been eating well or working out. And because it's basically been like all Ava all the time. They like reunited and it's been like a week of bliss, right? But
And the thing is that he like we've already in previous parts of this have he's talked about like how important it is for him to like
his
take care
routines
of
and
himself,
stuff.
to be fed,
Yeah.
to be like to
Medicated.
exercise, to take his meds, and all
Yeah.
things that are hard for him because it's hard for him to remember to do those things when
Right.
he so he before he left had a moment of bliss of like in love happiness that he was like wasn't sure if he should trust it, but
Hmm.
since he's been back they've been like holed up in the hotel living their best lives,
Yeah.
and now he hasn't thought about it until
Until Sue calls and tells him that Henry somehow still has a copy of this contract with his friend. He didn't apparently get them all, and like, oh no, what is he gonna do now?
so the plan had been all along to like get rid of all the copies so that the guy could be like, you know what, I'm gonna do
I'm
something with
manufacturing
it,
this. Yeah.
and that they wouldn't have had any proof that
Like
they
had
had
like
any
the
claim
contract never
over
even
it.
happened, basically.
um However, they did do like he went through with his like, fine, I'm doing my thing, and they were like
Sent him a copy of the contract, and we're like,
missing
no,
it.
you're not. And so he's like, crap, like who knows where he has another copy? Like, apparently I didn't get them all. Like, what the hell am I gonna do now?
And he's
And
out of
so,
ideas as far as what else he could do, and their like plan is out of the bag. So like, what are the chances
right.
that he would even have an opportunity?
And now, so he feels like he's crashing down after like a week on a high, and this is not good news, right? So he needs to think. He orders some food, and he asks Sue, he's like, by the way, why did you tell Ava I was hurt? And she's like, you were. And he's like, no, I wasn't. And she's like, yes, you were. You rushed this job. You took stupid chances to get back here faster. You almost died once. Like, you were hurt, basically. And he says, don't call Ava again. And she says, fuck you. I'll call her whenever I want to.
He's
And
like they become she's like I like talking to her, and you won't stop
yeah.
me.
And then she's like, and P.S. after this job, I'm retiring, and then I'll be a bridesmaid in your wedding. So there, basically, like she's like, you can't get rid of me, you little shit, right? And
It's
so
the
it's
best.
really funny. And so that afternoon, he goes home and takes a nap, and when he wakes up, things are not good. Like things are all wrong. He's in a like deeply depressed state, and so he calls his mom.
He feels
And
it, and I mean, it's interesting that like as things are like as the stuff is, I don't know, it's because they're so happy and whatever that like it's just rolling, but it's not until after that you realize like, oh yeah, he didn't do any of the things.
he
They
didn't
hadn't
work
really
out.
been
He
eating.
wasn't
He hadn't
eating
really
good.
been.
He wasn't talking to his therapist. Like, it's not good. So he calls his mom and he's like, something's wrong. And she's like, okay, we'll be there soon. She says, will. And he's like, I think to myself, like, did she say will be there soon? Like,
But
we
his
will?
sister is back from college too, so he's
Right. He doesn't know who she means. He just knows she said we and not me. So when he wakes up again, Ava is there and she's talking to him and he's like in bed. So she like cuddles up to him and she asks him like what his depression feels like. And he describes it. I thought it was the most interesting description and also probably super accurate. He said, it's like being stuck in the saddest day of your life, but you have amnesia and you can't remember why you're
it's a
sad.
fun.
And your brain just keeps telling you like it's never going to get better. Like it's always going to feel like this. And then she asks him, so as they're talking some more and he kind of describes some more stuff and she asks him the question he's been dreading, which is, have you ever tried to leave this world? And she can see from his face the answer, even though he doesn't say
Mhm.
it. Um, and so she starts crying and she's really upset and mad. And
And
he,
like we know from his POV chapters and from like conversations,
mhm,
other conversations that he's had on his end, that
yeah,
there have been two attempts before he left, and that he did not ever want her to
to know
know
about
because
it.
he didn't want her to feel responsible, and he
Yeah.
didn't want her to feel like she needed to like be there to stop him or help him or
Right.
whatever.
And so at this point, he finally explains to her about why he left 10 years ago. He needed to find reasons within himself to be okay and to stay. And it couldn't be about her or anyone except for himself.
Yeah.
And he's like, it was the right choice to leave then. I don't think I would be here now if I hadn't. Like, that's why I did it. And so they talk some more. And she offhanded mentions that his dad is there in the other room. And he immediately goes into a panic attack. And she's never seen that happen before. So she starts screaming his name. His dad comes in and starts talking him through his breathing
He like hugs
and
him
from
too, and
behind.
there's a
And he starts talking him through his breathing in five, out 10. And then, like, what do you see? What do you smell? What do you hear? It's a, a process that he's gone through a lot of times when he's had this happen. It's a heart-wrenching scene, to be honest.
yeah.
And he's in between all this, he can't really think clearly, but all he can think is like, how is my dad here? Like, how does he know how to do this? Like, what is happening? Right. And
And he's not clear enough to even really register that
yeah,
that is actually happening
yeah.
either.
And so at that point, his dad says, okay, Ava's gonna take over and I'm gonna get your meds and then I'm gonna leave. Like, I won't be here anymore. Okay. And he's like, okay. And that's like the end of the scene. And so some days later, Dez's mom has just like cleaned up from his lunch and she's like, Ava will be here soon. Alex is gonna come swimming with you today. And he talked to his therapist earlier that morning and she basically chewed him out for missing his appointments before that. And he's like, I needed to hear that. Like that was good. Um, and he makes a comment to his mom about like, I bet you're glad that, Natalie doesn't need you the same way
Same
I
way.
do. And she's like, yeah, right, kid, basically. And he's like surprised by this. And she's like, listen, of course she needs me. She needs me in a different way from you, but like that doesn't matter, like
Yeah.
nobody really has it all together. It's all smoke and mirrors. Everybody's just trying to do what they can to get
Do their
through the
best.
day,
Yeah.
And some people are better at it than others. Like that's it. And so this sort of makes him think about things a little bit differently, I think.
Yeah.
Uh, and so Ava comes and she brings him this zucchini bread, which I guess is a thing she used to make for him when they were young, and he's like very excited about it. And she tells him that Henri tried to get into her building that day and was like yelling, accusing her of setting fire to his server room, which is ridiculous because
Because she was
she
with
was with
him.
him and she had no idea she was going to be with him. He like lured her there under false pretenses. It's so stupid. So anyway, she's
This
like,
man doesn't
clearly,
make any sense
yeah.
and
And
clearly
she's like,
doesn't
clearly, I
care.
need to know the rest of this story. Like, what the hell is happening here? Right. So he finally tells her about his friend and the contract and all that stuff. And about how he doesn't know what to do now because he thought he had this plan and like it clearly did not work.
And
But she
she's
does know
like,
what to
I
do.
know tax law and I have a solution that
She's
doesn't involve.
like, I know US legal precedent and the IRS. Like, we're gonna do this. We're gonna fix this. And he's like, doesn't know what to think, but he's like, sure, okay. So we find out after that they brought a lawsuit before a judge who canceled the contract because of bad faith on Henry's company's part. They were never actually planning to manufacture his design, and therefore the contract is void. So
This is
Harim
something that
is
came
free
up earlier in the book.
in like a
When
work
she's
meeting.
there's one part where she's at work and everyone's having like they do this whole spiel about what and then
Right,
the boss asks her like what's your idea and she's like well we can't do any of this because of this
right. Some
tax
precedent,
law
some case. Yeah.
and so it's really interesting that it like
Yeah,
comes
it
back.
all came back around. So Harim is free, and meanwhile, the IRS is now going to be auditing Henry.
And
Um, and
he won't have
so
time to be obsessed with Ava.
yes. And so now they're heading to Dez's parents' house for another knitting night, and he's actually coming this time. And he's going to talk to his dad.
Yeah.
And so he hasn't been in his childhood home since he left at 15, which she didn't know until they're like on their way there. Um, and so he sends her off to the, where everybody is, and he kind of like makes his way over to the kitchen, and his dad is there, and he offers to help. He watches them for a while, like chopping up stuff, whatever, and he offers to help him. And so they're working together side by side in the kitchen, and he thanks him for what he did to help him the other day. And he's
Yeah.
like, "How did you know what to do?"
Oh, I was gonna
Um,
say that like his mom earlier had told him because he was like, I thought dad was here, but that seems
right.
wrong. And
Did
it
I
was like,
imagine that?
no,
Yeah.
yeah, no, he was
Yeah.
he was there. And so I think that's probably the reason why he even was up for going.
Yes, because he wanted to talk to him. And so he's like, well, I've read a lot of books about it. And he says, I guess you believe I'm not faking anymore. And in his own head, as soon as he says it, he's like, God bless. Like, that sounded so bitter. And like, that's not how I wanted this to go at all. Like, why did I say
Yeah.
that? Right.
I had the
And
same thought because I'm like, that he went there to try to like have, just like
yes, to try
reconnect.
to, yes.
And instead, the first thing he says, I'm like, oh
Yeah. And so Quinn says, I'm sorry, Desmond. And he's like, you're sorry. And he's like, yeah, I'm sorry that I thought that back then. And I'm sorry for a lot more than that. And he's like, basically, like, when you're up to a hard conversation, let me know because I have a lot to say to you, but like, we don't have to solve this all at once. Like, I'm fine just talking about the weather if that's what works for you for right now, you know?
yeah.
As long as we keep talking and I get to see you and be in your life, like, I've missed you so much and I'm so sorry. And they hug and they're both crying. And his mom walks in and is like surprised. And they both say it's the onion that they were cutting.
Yeah. I don't even know if they were cutting onion, but
No,
they're
they
like,
yeah, they
yep, it's
were.
the
He said, in
onion.
fact, he waited till his dad was cutting the onion before he said anything because he's like, this can be our excuse if we start crying. So that was good forethought for him. But yeah, it was funny. Um, and so later on that night, uh, his mom wants to know like how long him and Ava have been dating, and he's like, it's a little over a month. And he's like, I kind of tricked her into it. And he kind of looks at his dad, thinking his dad is gonna like not like that. Like it's like just another like bad thing that he did or whatever. But he sees
And
his
the
dad
dad's
trying
like,
not to
haha, I did
smile.
the same thing.
And he's like, that's interesting, right? So then he admits, some more stuff to his mom, and she's like, oh, you shouldn't trick people. And his dad just starts laughing. And he's like, I tricked your mom into dating me too. And we've been married for 27 years.
Like, it's been great.
And it's very cute. Um, and so when he and Ava are on their way back to her apartment, they're talking, and Ava's of course really excited about this progress with his dad. And and he's like, don't get too excited, but like, yes, it's good, right? And so, but then they walk into her apartment and they find Henry and three armed bodyguards and her sister Grace tied up in a chair. Henry thinks that
That
Ava is the one that sicked the IRS on him, which of course she's like, I can't do that. Like I would literally get disbarred. You're stupid. You know what I mean? Like it was not me. It was Desmond, of course. He's the one who called in favors to get the IRS to look at Henry's company. And he's like, I want you to call them off and I'm going to take your sister, like to make sure, kind of a thing.
it's just like that can't even I can't even do that.
She's
It's
like, that doesn't even make sense. Like this, then as soon as you give her back, I'll just call him back. And he's like, oh, you're right. I won't take your sister. I'll take you. And so his guard starts like untying Grace. And within 2 seconds of being untied, she's elbowed the dude in the face and grabbed his gun and shoots Henri in the stomach. He drops his gun. Desmond grabs it. Grace
Yeah.
is holding the gun on the other two and is like, move and I'll shoot you. And
Henri messed
Ava
with the
goes over there
wrong
and like gets
people.
all their weapons. And then Henri's like talking to her like she's not going to call the cops because she didn't call them the last time. But she's like, oh, hell yeah, I am. And so she literally called 911. It was like four guys broke in and they were armed and we had to shoot one of them. Like, send people basically.
Yeah.
And so Desmond notices the guard on the ground that Grace knocked out. Like they have his one gun, but they didn't check him for the rest of his weapons. So he jumps over there on him, and Henri looks at him crazy because he's just made some like ninja moves, and he's like, "Oh, I guess you never really know people, right?" Or
People. Yeah.
something like that. And yeah, so all that is now finally like closed for the moment. Though obviously
I
Henry's
have to
still
tell
like,
you that I was surprised because even though Henri was like clearly a villain,
yeah,
I was not I thought the IRS when I read it, I thought the IRS was going to keep him busy enough that he was just like going to disappear into the
yes,
sunset.
I
And
know, I
meanwhile,
agree. I was
here
surprised
he
too.
comes.
So it's 3 a.m. They're all at Dez's parents' house afterward, a whole big group of them. And they're all talking, and they convince Ava and Grace that they should move into his parents'
Their
building because it's very
building.
secure. And that way, at least for like a year, just enough time for Henri to like forget about them and like be in jail and not have to like worry about that stuff anymore. And so her sister's
Yeah.
reluctant because she really
And
likes
they
to
have
pay her own
like
way and it's
um
too expensive. But finally she's like, oh, fine.
but
Um,
they do own like it's not they could pay rent if they want to,
yeah.
but they're these people don't
Right.
need
Like
it.
we're your
Also
family. Like you
like
don't need to worry about it. Yeah. And they convince Des that he needs to move into the building too. And he's like, you're right, I will. And Ava is like shocked by this.
yeah.
Um, and he's like, and everybody should just sleep here tonight. And so Des is like, okay, great, bye. And he like drags Ava to his bedroom and she's like, you didn't even want to come in here last time we were here. Like that was only a few days ago.
Also,
Like what
you left
happened?
the whole city for 10 years and now it's like,
And now we're just like going to your bedroom to go to sleep. And he's like, are you kidding me? Like, uh, how many times I imagine spending the night with you here in this bedroom when I was a teenager. Like this is happening, right? Like it's going down.
yeah,
And so it's really cute.
it is.
And so that is the end. And then there's an epilogue. It's a few months later. He is he has opened his studio and he's getting ready for a class and he's talking to Sue, kind of closing out final items on their business. And she finally admits to him that it was his dad who gave the seed money for his business and vouched for him with clients and all that, and not Alex. He thought it was Alex this whole time. Alex took the credit for it and like nobody said anything. And it was his dad. And he
Yeah.
is like
Well,
shocked as shit about this. Like he cannot believe it. And also, she's like, and also, I reported to him for the first 2 years I worked for you. Like he was just checking in to make sure you were like okay. And he's like, have you? Well, he says like, were you reporting to him the whole time? And she's like, no, not the whole time. I had some ethics.
some. Yeah, she's
So
so
for the
funny.
first 2 years, she did. And he's like, and she's like, and he's been paying me. And she's like, he's like, but I pay you. And she's like, mm-hmm. He's like, so you let both of us pay you for the last however many years? Mm-hmm. I told you I had some ethics.
I want two people to pay me for my
Yes,
job.
it
Like,
is very funny. And he says to her, did he believe in me back then? And she's like,
yeah.
yes, he really did, even though it pissed him the hell off that you
Well,
were
and
so good at this job.
he talked her into working for him by
Yeah,
telling her how good
how good he
he was
was.
at his job.
And then
And
until she figured it out for herself, basically.
yeah.
And apparently her and Ava are about to take a trip to Hawaii together. They've been like become like travel buddies, which is hilarious. And he's like now he has to go teach a bunch of like tiny tots martial arts and he's just like spinning, right? Um so and he also bought like a fixer-upper house that's like 2 blocks away from Ava's parents' house. And
Yeah.
which she is like acts annoyed by, sort of, but also like he really needs a hobby to like spend time and money on that's like healthy and useful, and that's so he's gonna like fix up this house.
And they could still live in like it's such a good setup. I'm like,
Yeah.
I would love to have like
Yeah.
you know, my partner's parents own a very swanky building that is close to all of my jobs and has an excellent view, but
Yeah.
also I
Have a
can like we can take
brownstone.
our time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I
and
was
of course
like,
she knows eventually he wants them to live there, and she's not so sure about that situation, but like, they'll get there when they get there kind of thing. Um, but she's like, it is a good tax shelter. And he's like, yeah, it's great. That's why I bought it. And she's like, okay.
mhm,
And so she kind of says to him, like, so you've been stable for a while now, and I want to ask you a question. Like, what does your bipolar feel like to you? Like all the different parts, the mania, the everything, right? And so she also said she's been reading about some things and she thinks they should name his illness. So they name it Davis for when they're like talking about it. Like it's like
yeah,
a separate entity from him. Um and so he kind of compares it to a house that he's inherited that has a lot of issues and like he can't sell it and he tries not to really have an opinion about it because it's overwhelming and he can't change it, so he just has to like keep it moving basically.
yeah,
And so he has to do his best to keep it from falling apart. And he has found contractors who can come in and help tell him about the trouble spots, but he has to do all the work himself. And that's like how he describes it. And she's like, well, I mean, we're partners though. Doesn't that mean I have partial ownership of this house? And he's like, well, we'll have to
no.
decide together, like how much you want to be involved and how much you want to be responsible for. And she's like,
But he is basically like, but no, it's my
but
like
no.
I
Yeah.
own the house and
Yeah.
I am responsible for the house
And
ultimately.
he's kind of says like there's no perfect answer. Like everybody does the best they can and sometimes you don't know what's right to have done until you look back at it and realize if it was right or wrong. But like we all just do the best we can and hope for the best. And she's like, okay, so that's it then. Like we will love each other and we'll try our hardest and we'll hope for the best. And he's like, that sounds perfect. And that's the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, I mean, for a book that had a very bananas premise, but then also had some very like heavy topics that it dealt with, it I did have a fun time reading it.
Yes.
And I felt like I got to see like a window into something that I'm sure a lot of people experience and that it's like a tough thing to manage.
Yeah.
So yeah, really
Yeah.
really I super enjoyed it. And
I
I
did
thought it was
too.
different from a lot of the things I've been reading. So
Yep. We loved it. And next week we're going to talk to Penny Reid all about this book and everything else. So join us over on YouTube and we'll see you
oh,
then.
also if you want more friends to lovers vibes, this month we did do a friends to lovers,
Yes.
both each of us put friends to lovers books that we have enjoyed
Recommendations. Yes.
on our feed. So check that out as well on
Yes.
Insta.
And we'll see you on YouTube.
See ya.